Okay, good morning, everybody. Good to see you. Glad you're here. Glad everybody's in church this morning. Let's go back to 1 Peter this morning. 1 Peter chapter 1. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. I said last week I was going to maybe try to do this, and I just felt like that's what I needed to do today. It's not a whole lot left to say about that, what I had last week, but there's still some good points to make about this scripture here. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13, scripture says this, "Wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ." Peter was admonishing us to gird up the loins of our mind. And we talked about that last week, about how, what that looks like and some things that we can do to do that. And we made some points about different areas of our life that we need to do that in. But I want to talk a little bit more about those things this morning. And I'm just going to jump right in. We might actually get out on time this morning. An ungirded mind. An ungirded mind. We talked about that. But I'd like to say this too, that a girded mind, a mind that is bound up tight and contained, like you ever put on your shoes and you tie them and then you got to stop a little later and tighten them up? They didn't come untied, they're just not very tight. And when I think I was probably 18, I sprained my right ankle really bad doing something real foolish on a bicycle. And it tore some things in that ankle that have never been right since. And since that time, I have rolled that ankle and tore them again probably 6 or 8 different times. And it's something that I have to be extremely mindful of always. I never step off of anything with my right foot first. And because it's weak. That foot don't hang right off the end of my leg. It hangs at an angle, and if I step on a rock the wrong way, just the smallest little old rock, it'll roll it and that ankle will hit the ground again all the way. And it makes me sick to think about it, because I know what it feels like, and it's sickening. Well, your mind has to be bound up. I don't wear loose fitting shoes. You won't hardly ever see me in a pair of cowboy boots anymore, and that's why, because I just can't do it. They're not tight enough. Not around my foot, but around my ankle that is weak. And we all have things about our mind. We have weaknesses. And so we talked about last week about there being a real necessity for us to honestly acknowledge the areas of our mind where we're weak. Because if you want to pretend like you're not weak, or you want to just ignore the areas that you're weak in, or just be in complete denial of the fact that you have weak areas in your mind, like keeping your mind where it needs to be, then that will be the very areas that you sprain like this ankle over and over, and it'll be the place you fail every single time, over and over and over. And to the point where you'll just become crippled that way. If I didn't take care of this foot of mine and the problem that I have with it, I would always have a busted ankle, wouldn't I? And over time, tearing them ligaments over and over and over and over again would render that ankle completely useless. I'd be crippled. And we do the same thing with our minds, because we won't recognize the fact that, you can hurt your mind. There's a lot of things that come along in life that can really hurt you. They can do something that's traumatic to your mind. And to say, well, I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps, or there's a lot of people that have a mentality when it comes to things about weakness of mind, that it is emasculating, or that it's, you're less than a person if you have problems in certain areas mentally. And I'm just telling you, look, the best of us have areas of our life, our mental, where we need help. You need help. You're vulnerable in those areas. So we need to be very mindful of this and tighten up that shoe, so to speak. Tighten them laces up. in these specific areas of weakness. So he says this, gird up the loins of your mind. And so I mentioned these last week, but boy, I was running across them just hitting the bullet points because we was way out of time. But I'm going to just go over them again. What are some of these areas of our mind, the loins of our mind, that need to be girded up? Well, a girded up mind is a disciplined mind. To gird the loins of your mind, another way to say that is to become very disciplined mentally. Aware of your weaknesses and disciplined in your mind. Well, disciplined how? There's people that become very disciplined in their life. They're very regimented. There's a certain, way that they live, and a way that they conduct themselves, and a way they keep their house, and a way that they organize their drawers, and the way that their shop looks, and all this kind of stuff. And that's very disciplined. And people say, well, it's obsessive compulsive. They call it a disorder now, because people can become very obsessed with it, very hyper fixated on the order, and yet be very, very disordered in most of the other areas of their life. It's a real danger, because I've been a trim carpenter among many other things for a lot of my adult life. And when you're doing trim, attention to detail is very important. And, so making sure that it's a true 90, and making sure your joints fit right, and making sure your laps look good, and making sure that there's no gaps, and making sure all this stuff. And you get to where you, in that arena, in that theater, as they call it, you become very disciplined to a certain standard. There's a certain standard we got to maintain, and that's my standard, and that's my discipline. And then people they'll have one area of their life where they're extremely disciplined in, and then they consider themselves to be a very disciplined person. You'll see people do this with intellect. They will be extremely intellectual, and yet be so unhealthy that they die before they're 50 years old because of indulgence, obesity, undisciplinedness in their life. A lot of times you'll see diabetics that are this way. Now, if you're diabetic and you're hearing this, I'm not picking on that. I'm just saying, I know some. And they're very regimented in other areas of their life, but in the matter of their disease that they have, they just carry a pen, they carry a needle. They just eat whatever they want, man. And just shot. Well, you only get so many of those before that don't work anymore. And then what happens? Yeah. So, are they really disciplined in their life? Well, not where they need to be. There's areas of our life where we can be overly hyper-fixated on being very regimented and disciplined in a certain area of our life, where it's really not as necessary as what you give it, the effort you give it. And then other areas of our life, they're just completely neglected. And so, in this matter of girding up the loins of your mind, there has to be there has to be rationality. You and I talked about that a little bit yesterday, about rational thinking. Rational thinking deals only in the truth and facts. If I have 4 tires on my car and one of them, the cords are hanging out of it, I'm not going to replace the other 3 that are good and not do anything to the one that the cords are hanging out of. Why? Well, because rational thinking says that one's the one with the problem. Rational thinking also says I'm going to replace that tire, but I'm also going to fix whatever's wrong with that wheel that's making that tire do that. You see? Well, rational thinking, you must have that along with discipline, or else it's just like shooting blindly out into you hear the gun shoot, the bullet goes somewhere, but what's the target? Who knows? Who knows? It could be anything. There has to be purpose behind girding up the loins of your mind, and discipline, and rational thinking. There's got to be intentionality along with it. You can't just participate in the race if you're not going to run. You see, these 5Ks are a big thing nowadays. Everybody has a 5K for this and a 5K for that. I don't know why they call them 5Ks. We don't even measure distance by kilometers in this country, so I guess it just sounds cool. Or it looks better on a sticker on the back of your car. I ran the 5K. Well, whatever. All I'm saying is that nobody, you ever see anybody go do a 5K but they're not a runner? I have. Come to any random small town in the Midwest, and there'll be, at some point in the year, there'll be at least 1 or 2 5Ks for some charity event or something like that, and it's a community participation thing more than anything. But it's funny to me because you got the people that are there in the front of the line, and they're wearing all the gear, and they've got their $200 tennis shoes on, and they got their headband on and their wristbands on, and they're taking it real serious, and they're on the starting line all crouched down. And then there's the guy in the back, and he's chugging a 20-ounce Mountain Dew before he gets started, and he's just like, yeah, whatever, he's there in his blue jeans and stuff. And well, there's a lot of people when it comes to this matter of girding up the loins of their mind, they take it about that serious too. There's the people that think that they're going to run it, and they're going to gird them up because it's what they do. They're a disciplined person. But they don't make it. Then there's other people that are going to do it, but they have no clue about how to even begin because they're not disciplined in any way in their life. Now, if I ask for a show of hands here this morning about who considers themselves to be a disciplined person here this morning. Well, I think out of a sense of, I don't know, humility perhaps, there wouldn't be very many people raise their hand. But I feel that in our own private lives, there's a lot of things we do desire to be disciplined in, and some of us strive. Some of us strive for discipline in certain areas of our life. But I fear that this matter of our mind is one of those things that's grossly neglected. So girding up the loins of your mind, I mentioned last week, and we'll just do them again. One of the areas that we need to gird up the loins of our mind in and become disciplined in our mind, and what comes into our mind is areas of factual influence. The things that we allow to influence the way that we think. I talked about this yesterday, about this too, but it's something I think about a lot because it's something, there's a transition happening in our generation, like the one you're living in, my kids are growing up in, everybody's living in, and there's a transition happening in the way people think. You can say, well, that's been going on since the dawn of time. Yeah, but it's different now. There's a lot of new influences on humanity that is changing the way they think or don't think. We talked about that yesterday. Me and Dad was sitting here talking and talking about AI, and even on a very day-to-day basis, how it's really influencing and affecting the way people don't think anymore. Because it does your thinking for you. And it's very handy. It's a tool. In the building trades, there's all kinds of apps you can get on your phone now where you just take a picture of the actual room, and it will give you a whole string of pictures of that room with different colors painted in it, different designs of flooring installed in, and it's a real picture. It's not a painting or a cartoon-looking picture. It's that picture. AI is able to do that. You go to bid a job, you can literally type in or take a picture of the room, and it will give you a materials list that you can then hit a button and it'll send it to Lowe's, and they'll put together your material package for you based on a picture your phone took of a room that you're wanting to remodel. And it picks out all the material, it makes the list, it does all the math, it sends the invoice to Lowe's, they put your order together, and then you can just have it drop shipped to your house. And you don't even have to know what you're doing. You just have the app and it. Now, I'll just throw this out there for good measure. I don't trust those things. I don't think they'd really probably get it right. But come on. I mean, even in the matter of the trades, tradesmen used to have to know how to figure all this stuff. And be able to not only that, but be able to visualize what something can be. That is something that is a thing of the past. As a builder, and at one time as an artist doing things commissioned for people, it is the absolute biggest obstacle to overcome in the trades or in any kind of service business at all, is getting your client to be able to visualize what you see that you're going to build. They say, I want this addition built on my house. Well, I look at it and I'm like, okay, right there's where the peak's going to hit, right there. And the walls will be here, and we got to do this way. And I've literally had them say, just do whatever you want to do. Well, no, but what do you want? We just want an addition. Just do whatever you think needs to be done in order for that to happen. That's as deep as they think into it because they can't visualize anything. Well, where there is no vision, people perish. And that ain't just in the matter of souls, that's in everyday life. If you can't visualize tomorrow, how are you going to prepare for it? If you can't visualize some disaster that could come because of your mind just wandering aimlessly through life, then how are you going to ever have any preparation made for when calamity strikes? Has anyone in here ever had calamity strike in their life? Yeah, of course we have. Everyone has. How prepared were you for it? Well, there are instances where you are, but there's a lot where you're not. Because we don't visualize things going that way. So, what makes you drop into that groove of thinking and that way of living where you don't think outside of the box at all and you don't prepare for the possible? And you don't look at things rationally and with some intellect enough to be like, realistically, let's put it that way. You don't look at things realistically. Well, a lot of it has to do with the influence, the factual influence that you allow to affect your mind and the way that you think and process thought. Let me say it this way. If you fill your mind with fantasy, you're going to expect fantasy out of reality. I like to watch TV as much as the next guy. And in my life, it's something that I've had to rein back in. Because there is an unending resource of things to watch. Now with streaming services, it's even more so. And a guy could just sit there, I guess, if he didn't want to move, and he could just watch TV till the day he died and not see everything that's there. But it's a colossal waste of time because 99.9% of what's on there is rubbish, and it's fantasy, and it's not real. None of it truly is real. Even if it's about something that has happened in the past, reality is the day you're sitting in right now. And, it's good to watch things that are educational or that are informative, but make sure they're factual. There's a lot of things you can watch that sound factual, but they are a lie. And I don't really care who hears this, but, I'll just say it. There is all kinds of stuff, and especially on these things, all them reels and stuff, and it's so, it's like the devil bait in a trap. It truly is. Because it's just enough information for you to be like, what? Well, I gotta look that up. Come on, for real? That can't be right. Is it? Maybe. Man. Like, all right, for example, this matter of the ice wall and the flat earth theory. Come on, y'all. Do you realize how much of a foothold that is taking in our world now? And see, they have no proof of it whatsoever. It's just a theory that is thrown out there as, well, can you prove that it's not that way? Can you fly up into space and see the earth as a globe? No, you can't. So you're saying that, have you ever truly seen it with your eyes? Well, the answer is no, because I've never been to space. Oh, well then, I guess you can't really then. What authority do you have to say that it ain't flat or that it is round? So you're no better than me, sir, if you're going to take someone else's word that it's round, because I'm just taking somebody else's word that it's flat. Do you see the deception there? It's doubt cast upon facts. You can take a helium balloon and tie a GoPro to it and let it go, and if it's transmitting back to you or you're able to recover it, it goes up to 80 or 100,000 feet in the air, and you can clearly see the circumference of the earth. It's a no-brainer. I mean, so what are they founding? What's their foundation that they're building off of to try to disparage the idea that the earth is round? It's just to tear down what you know as facts. And the longer you sit and entertain it, look, you must resist the devil. You must resist him, or else you will succumb to his lies. It doesn't matter what the lies are. Whether it's about some gross sin is actually okay to do, or if it's something silly like people thinking the earth is flat. Do you not realize that the reason why there was this thing called the Dark Ages is because that one of the main pillars that all of their nonsense was built on was that the theory that the earth was flat? Didn't you learn that in school? Probably not, because they don't teach that stuff no more, I guess. But that's really why. I mean, Columbus, they thought he was insane because he was going to sail off the edge of the earth and perish. Yeah. Who was the people that established that theory, and why did they do it? I'll fast track it for you. They did it to keep ignorant people in fear so that they could keep them in one place and control them. Same reason why the Catholic Church murdered people who tried to take the Latin Bible and turn it into English so that the people could actually understand what was being said. William Tyndale was murdered, and then they dug his bones up and burned them and threw them in the river because he translated the Bible. You know who did that? The Catholic Church did that. Why'd they do it? Because if you had to come to them and take their word for what the Bible said, then they could control everything you did, including whether you went to heaven or hell, how much money you had to give the church, and so on and so forth. It's facts. It's history. Read it before it's erased. But it really is the way it was. That's why anything that you see that is established as fact, that you see people starting to attack with disinformation and doubt, you really need to throttle that back. You really need to put a governor on that in your mind. Don't let that stuff affect, don't receive it into your mind. Do not listen to it. Because it's not, okay, let's say you decide, I have reviewed all of the facts that I can find about it, and I've come to the conclusion that the earth, in fact, is not flat. Okay. But what has that done to how you think? It has changed how you think. No, it hasn't. Oh, yes, it has. Because now you're going to start running everything through the filter of your intellect that you gather. Look, nobody has anything that wasn't given to them, including knowledge. And so to think that you have understanding that no one else in the world has, look, that's what you run into. And it does not matter social status. You could be the richest man in 3 counties or the absolute poorest guy in 3 counties. And that poor guy will think he's as smart or smarter than even the richest guy, and vice versa, based on what he has been able to gather of information. That's how everybody filters through everything to decide what's right and wrong nowadays. They do that which is right in their own eyes. How come? Because the way that they think has been changed. They don't look to an established truth to base facts off of. They get to decide what's factual based upon how intellectual they are about gathering information. That's why this is the destruction of our society, because people are basing reality on fantasy. And there is an endless supply of fodder for the fantasy. That's why you have kids wanting a litter box in school, because they want to be a cat. And the teachers that will pour litter in a box and put it in the corner of the room for them to defecate in because they think they're a cat. And they can't say nothing about it, because then that's hate speech, because somebody established a rule that's hate speech, that everybody has the right to be whatever they want to be. No, you don't have a right to make me have to pretend you're a cat. Sorry, that's not factual. That's not rational. And it's not real. It's fantasy. If you want to play like you're a cat, go out in the woods and go eat mice. See if you can catch a mouse and eat it, because that's what cats do. You know? Don't make me have to give you a litter box to go to the bathroom in front of all my children. That's not happening. Bunch of crazy people. Insane. Why? Because the way they think has been changed. Factual influence. Gird up the loins of your mind. What about areas of spiritual influence? Well, it's the same way. And keep in mind that in both of these arenas, and even in matter of health that we talked about, but we'll speak on that in a minute, but especially in the areas of factual and spiritual influence, if you have a spirit of rebellion in you, these are going to be your strongholds right here. Someone says, the Bible says that what you're doing, the way you're living, is wrong. And the rebellious spirit rises up and says, well, I don't care what you think that old book says. It doesn't matter to me because I don't see anything wrong with it. And nobody that I know thinks there's anything wrong with it. Catch up with the times. Things are different now. Blah, blah, blah. And you've heard all the excuses and so on and so forth to disparage factual and spiritual influence. But it doesn't change it. It just changes it in their mind. Like they choose to rebel against. I mean, look, everybody says that they rebel against doing right, or rebel against their parents, or rebel against the law, or no, they just are rebelling against established truth. Really. I mean, if you think about it, that's really what they're doing. If they'll rebel against the speed limit, and they'll rebel against their teacher in school, and they'll rebel against their parents at home, and they'll rebel against the law and do something awful, and because they're rebels against God, you think they're going to then turn around and do everything God says because He said to do it? No. That's why rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, because witchcraft is the actual opposition of God and His ways. It's the devil's ways, see. And so, spiritual influence. People not only will believe crazy things that people tell them regarding spiritual matters, but they will also make up and invent and imagine, the most insane and crazy and blasphemous ideas you've ever heard. It's funny. It's not funny. It's ironic the way that it happens, because there is the fantasy and the theory and the imagination that when it comes to fruition, the Bible says sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Well, death's a real thing. Sin can be a matter of the mind, but when it's finished, it produces a fruit that's tangible, that's you feel, you can see, you experience, you're affected by. I know somebody, and it's this whole matter of what you see, and once again, the influence about what you let influence your mind. And I'll just touch this and move right along, so I'm not going to dig into it, but it's like this matter of multiple wives, polygamy, and all that stuff. You understand what I'm talking about? Okay, there's shows on TV for whatever reason. I mean, isn't it illegal in our country? Yes, polygamy is illegal, correct? And yet they have allowed Hollywood to make reality TV shows about these people who have these men who have multiple wives. They're polygamists, and it's following their day-to-day life and all of the drama and the comedy and the tragedy and the struggles and who cares? It's scripturally wrong, and it's morally wrong, and it is legally wrong. How much more wrong does it need to be before you look at it and say, I don't want no part of that? If our legal system looks at it and says, no, that needs to be illegal because it's that, then there has to be some kind of bad outcome from it, wouldn't you say? If our secular legal system opposes it. Well, duh. But people watch it on TV and they become changed in the way that they think about what it is, and then they start entertaining the thought of it. Okay? And the fantasy of it. And the mind is ungirded. The devil's in. And guess what? You know what it results in? Runaways, destroyed plans, destroyed hearts, destroyed homes and families. You know, we know of these things going on. And it is a tragedy. And you say, how on earth? What would possess someone to think of? How could you be raised this way and then change the way you think? This is it. Ungirded mind. Influence allowed into your home, into your children's lives, people they're around, things that they see on their phone and things they watch on TV, and just the influence. You think that other people don't think? Well, yeah, they think about stuff. And it don't always take the upward turn, I'll just tell you. Spiritual influence. You know, people, and I promise you, the people that I know that are involved in this mess have scripture that they stand on that supports the way they think in their mind. Okay? They've wrested the scriptures and they feel like God's on their side. He's leading them. Oh my. Well, on the outside looking in, it's real obvious, but not to them. And moving on, we said that about the areas of health consciousness. Now, I would love to spend 2 hours talking about this, and it ain't just about being fat. There's a whole lot of influence medically that is of the devil. Please understand that. If you don't believe that, you need to believe that. You know, if I brought my car to you and it was broken and I didn't have very much money and I really needed my car to keep my job, and I said, can you fix my car? And you said, well, I ain't never done it before, but I'll practice on it. Would you leave your car with me and just let me do whatever I wanted to? No, but you'll literally go in there and let them cut you open, mess with your insides, or shoot chemicals into you and your children, by the way, and you ain't got the foggiest London clue what it is. And someone can give you exact proof and say, this is what it's doing. And you look at them and say, you're insane, while you're letting them stick some more stuff in you. God will hold you accountable for what you do to the innocent. Just remember that. Be careful who you let influence you medically. Because do you know what the Bible is talking about when it's talking about sorcery? It's drugs. And the medical field, the medical world in our country and in our world, but more so in the United States than anywhere else in the world, are the biggest legalized drug pushers that have ever existed. Ever. They do not care about your health. They care about money first, and then the agenda of controlling the population. You're insane. Whatever. Okay. Take your grandma or your grandpa up there and see how much they care about getting them better. Or about how much they care about them. They'll give them a certain amount of attention, and if that don't fix the symptom, then they literally will put them at the end of the hallway down there and let them die. Tell me I'm wrong. You take your family to the hospital, you got to go in there with your war paint on, or else you ain't going to get any kind of service at all. The medical, the ones that are in it that still have some kind of goodwill towards it are so overworked and understaffed that they spend most of their time apologizing to you because they can't give you the care that they need to give. They know that you need. And they run themselves ragged, a lot of times at the expense of their own marriages and finances and families and children and everything. It's a travesty. It's a travesty. And yet it goes on and it's worshipped like the absolute number one God of this country, including in all the churches that you sit in. Say something bad about a doctor or a nurse or a vaccine, And they'll nail you to the wall with spikes at the front of their church. It is an idol. And it is very much influenced by the devil. And he's got his fingers all in it because he controls. I mean, he can control everything with that narrative. It sets the standard for whether you are a kook or whether you are a viable person to be listened to. It really does. In the eyes of a lot of people. If you don't believe me, post something on your Facebook, anti-vaccine, and watch the people that laugh at you. Or that will jump in there and rend you to pieces. They'll show their true colors that they can't help it. They cannot keep their mouth shut. They'll do it. Moving on. A mind girded up is a sober mind. Sober. We say, well, sober, what do you mean sober? Not drunk? No, well, listen. This is some definitions for sober. Not mad or insane. That's the first one. Just not insane. Well, you can say, well, insanity is very subjective. Well, it absolutely is not. When you will do the same activity over and over and over again, expecting a different result every time, that's insanity. That's one of the real good signs of insanity. You don't. Reason, rationality, truth, facts, they're all absent from your tools that you have mentally to process things. You know? A man says to his wife, please don't leave me. Please don't be unfaithful to me. Look what you're doing to our family. Look what you're doing to our children. Don't you realize that what you're doing is going to destroy their lives? And they look at you and say, no, it's not. People do it all the time. Kids are fine. My happiness is more important than what you're saying, because if I'm not happy, how can I make their lives good? Well, what kind of nonsense is it? It's insanity. That's what the world runs on now. It's insanity. Not sober. Not mad or insane. Not wild. Visionary or heated with passion. Not wild, visionary, or heated with passion. It means you don't just run on emotion. Everything you do don't have an emotional response. Every bit of reasoning for everything in your life doesn't have to begin and end with an emotion being tied to it somehow. Having the regular exercise of cool, dispassionate, that's the opposite of passionate, reason. Having the regular exercise of cool, dispassionate reason. Sober. Be sober. Be vigilant. Why? Because your adversary, the devil, goeth about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Be what first? Sober. Be sober. It means to be regular. Regular, you mean just like, oh, just a regular guy? No. Regular means there's a pattern to your life. There is order to your life. Regular. This happens at this time every day. Regular. Sober. Calm. You know? What does everybody go and spend thousands of dollars to go off to different places in the world for? To find some peace and quiet? Yeah. Sit by a river somewhere and just enjoy the calm. Better make time. Take time to make time to be calm. Not under the influence of passion. Well, that's a lot of the standard of what people gauge other people by as to whether or not they're, serious about what they're doing. How passionate are you? Oh, what do? I run a nonprofit. It's my passion. I've heard people say that about silly things like running a tow truck and stuff. I mean, what do? I'm a fireman. It's my passion. You even know what passion is? A lot of people confuse certain words with other words. Like, passion. People like to think that it's their passion because they can be obsessive about it and nobody can judge them for it because it's my passion. I've seen people literally try to pastor a church obsessively and call it their calling or their passion. But they're not sober. They're just obsessive. Be sober. As sober judgment, a man in his sober senses. A sober mind is not full of constant mirth and foolishness either. You know, everything's not a joke. Everything's not a dirty joke. Ugh. It's all you hear. There's an innuendo behind everything. Now, you can't even speak English without somebody over there trying to make something out of nothing. It's ridiculous. It's wrong. Not given to a default state of mind of nonsense, disbelief, arrogance, and worldly wisdom, etc. A mind that is not sober will be a mind that is arrogant. If you don't believe me, argue with someone who thinks they're right about a fantasy. They're extremely arrogant. Someone who's living wrong, and then their fantasy that they're living in their mind, it's going to all work out just fine. Look at them in the eyes and tell them God's going to judge you for your sin, and watch the arrogance that comes out of them about the way they're living. They're not sober-minded at all. It's a seriousness that makes you take precautions for the real threats and dangers that exist and that you and me and that all of us are vulnerable to. Satan's devices, they're called. You know? What do you think preaching is supposed to be all about anyways? Preaching that's not about the gospel is precautionary. It's warning you, saying, hey, do you see this? Do you see this right here? It's not what you think it is. Beware. Caution. This right here, it's poison. Don't do this. Well, why do people exert any kind of effort and energy to do that? Why do preachers get up and preach against stuff? Well, it's because they want you to take it serious. Be sober about it. A sober mind will have hope in the grace of God, which is the real source. The grace of God is the source of our hope, you see. What does he say there? Be sober and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Hope is faith, hope, and charity. Grace of these is charity. But what does the Bible say? I mean, faith and hope lumped together right there. They're kind of a synonymous thing. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. So it's involved. And when he says, be sober and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought. Well, does that mean that when you get born again, you get all the grace you're ever going to need right then? No. It's going to be brought to you. Have hope for that. Be sober. You're not going to be able to have much hope if you're not sober-minded about the reality of things. You're going to have God's help and His grace to deal with this stuff. We're not hopeless. You got to have hope in God's grace for what we need it for. You got to have hope in His grace for when you need it. Hope for how much you'll need. And hope in trusting Him that He'll give it to you right when you need it. There's dying grace, and you've heard of all the other stories about people that in the moment God gave them the grace to get through whatever it was that was in front of them. But do you think that the life that led up to that moment was a life of insobriety of mind, ungirdedness of mind, influenced by everything that speaks out there? And then right in the moment, the Lord just come through because they had hoped so much for His grace, and He just come through and just picked. You prepare today for what's coming tomorrow in all things. So a mind that's girded up hopes in the grace of God and His timing. A mind that is girded up believes the real threats and dangers that exist. A mind that's girded up knows where you're weak. You're looking for your own weaknesses so you can gird them up. And a mind that's girded up actually does something to combat those things on all fronts in his life and not just in one area of life. Amen. Gird up your mind. It's worth the effort.